Someone has a stroke every 40 seconds, and someone dies from a stroke every 4 minutes. These are astounding statistics. We're going to meet our guest today, and she's going to have a lot more to say about this. Joyce Sampson is a writer and stroke awareness advocate. Joyce, most of us have heard the acronym FAST drummed into our heads as indicators that one is having a stroke. If something is changing in your face, if something is changing in your arms or your speech, you get to a hospital fast. So with so much publicity about FAST, face, arms, speech, hospital, why is a stroke awareness advocate necessary? Don't you think we're aware enough?
Well, I would hope so. There is another thing we talk about other than FAST. It's called Be Fast, and it includes those two um, letters at the beginning. I think stands for balance, and I can't remember what the other one is, but it goes further than what people teach you generally. People
Okay.
think that if you have a drool, your face, one side of your face droops, and if you can't slur speech, for example. But and the time is critically important. Now, why stroke advocacy is so important is because people don't know this. There's no one there to teach them this. Um, so, in stroke advocacy, what we do is, well, we do a lot of things. There's a lot of different things you can do. You, as a person, can do it yourself by simply knowing the signs and symptoms and telling your family and friends these things. That's advocacy. You can volunteer with the American Heart Association or different organizations like Circle of Rights in Gaithersburg or um, Stroke Comeback Center in Virginia, and they have an office now in Rockville. You can do all sorts of things to bring this message out. And you will find that doctors will say patients don't listen to them. They can tell them all day about high blood pressure and all the risk factors that go along with stroke: high blood pressure, high cholesterol, diabetes, heart conditions. All of these things are manageable. The doctor tells them, but a doctor told me personally, he said, my patients don't listen to me. They listen when they hear their peers. They listen when they hear someone who's had the stroke or whatever illness it is. They are not going to listen to me. He can preach all day, and that's not going to happen. So, even at the American Heart Association, in the statement they're working on right now for 2006 about health literacy and stroke education, stroke prevention, stroke management, they talk about the fact that community education is crucial when
Uh,
it comes to telling people what stroke is, what the risks are, and talking about managing lifestyle things like getting exercise, eating right. And people don't really know. When you talk about, oh, you should exercise, you should eat right, you should lose weight, stop smoking, people don't really realize what that does to your body.
uh,
And they don't realize what they can do personally. And I'm here to tell you, you can do anything in the world and you're not going to prevent a stroke just by doing those things. Sometimes it's random. You can be healthy all over and it still happens, but you can lower your chances by doing all those things. And you want to volunteer, it's very crucial to those, what do you call it, stroke education presentations. And generally, Circle of Rights does it at senior citizen places. But that is not the end all. People think that stroke is an old people's disease. It's
right.
growing as far as younger people 25 years and up. I know a young lady had her stroke when she was 24 years old, had just
Wow.
had a baby, and
Yeah.
she had a stroke 2 or 3 weeks later. And now she's partially paralyzed on one side.
There's
Uh,
so much to learn about having a stroke, what it looks like, and how to deal with it. I just want to backtrack for a second because you mentioned Gaithersburg and Rockville, and I just want listeners to know that those areas are both in Maryland. And you also entered, and you also mentioned an organization in Virginia. Joyce, I'm going to ask you if you would to tell us a little bit about some of your experiences because you didn't realize what was going on. And as I understand it, you actually had 7 strokes in, I think it was a 2-month
Two,
period of time.
2009, between August 30th, 27th through October 3rd. I had 2 of them in the hospital when they finally decided that they needed to keep me because my strokes weren't very they didn't look very severe
Ah,
because I wasn't paralyzed. I regained my speech very quickly. And every time I had a stroke, it would take something away from me. The thing was, it would I found most of my deficits, my cognitive deficits, came after I was released from the hospital. But
one of the things that you've talked about, and you're writing a book, and you sent me some of it, and I have to tell you that it is beautifully written. I don't know if you've gotten
okay,
any feedback about it, but it is absolutely compelling and beautiful. So I'm going to look forward to receiving the completed manuscript. But one of the things that you say is that the doctors don't really talk to you about the cognitive deficits that can come with a stroke. And so you wound up feeling differently in ways that you didn't understand or expect.
that's right. In the case of when I almost drank ammonia instead of lemonade because
It's scary.
I didn't realize that I had this, I call it the opposite problem. Nobody ever told me anything about it. I had to learn these things on my own. And that's why this book is so important to me because it's an academic book available to medical students and doctors. And they need to know these things because they don't, and they'll put you out in the street and you have no idea. I didn't know, for example, I was trying to cross the street
Right.
and I saw the red light was red. And I knew it in my head, but a part of my brain that did not know it made me cross the street anyway. So I was in the middle of George Washington, GW University, in the middle of the street, and I had no idea why these cars were blowing their horns at me. And so I learned the, the wow. I noticed how bad my problems were in the street, and I
Okay.
could have gotten killed many times by not
Absolutely.
knowing.
Absolutely. And you also talked about there was a time, and maybe it's a smaller issue, but maybe not, when you were actually pouring coffee, but the cup was upside down. You could have
Right, and
burned.
I still do that. I have to make sure that everything's okay before I do something. I can't let myself get overtired, and I can't get too confident either, because the moment you do, it sneaks up on you, and you say, "Oh my God, I should have been more careful." So, and I might read something that says, Joe does not like coffee. I may interpret it as Joe does not like coffee because the brain just switches things up.
Gotcha. Gotcha. So it sounds like you really need to pay attention to yourself all the time
Every
in ways that so many of us take things for granted and we wind up doing things and we don't even know that we're doing them. But what you're saying is, I mean, quite frankly, all of us could stand with paying more attention to ourselves. But for you, it can really be life altering in very significant ways.
And you know
You
what I'd like to say to people who are around people who've had a stroke, if they love them, if they like them, if they work with them, they're, people like to compare what's going on with you to what's
right,
going on with them.
right.
I say, I'm exhausted. I can't do this anymore. And they'll say, oh, I get tired too. Well, that's not the same thing as cognitive overload and sensory overload. That's just not the same. And you have to, and I've had a friend, she said, I said, oh, I was proud of myself for doing something like making a day making a whole day without freaking out. And
Mhm.
she said, "Well, that's so nice. It's not all about you all the time, is it?"
Oh
Now,
my.
you know that hurt me, you know,
Absolutely.
because I think this person is a friend of mine who understands me. Like, she's been there from the beginning, and she takes what my deficit is an attitudinal problem,
And
you
kind of
know?
made a joke out of it. How hurtful.
Yeah. And people need to realize that they need to, if they care anything about you, they need to understand that they will never understand what's going on with you.
Right.
Just like Sue at Circle of Light writes, she has problems with attention deficit and all that. And sometimes she can go off and but she knows I don't understand her problems. But the thing is, I don't need to understand her problems. I just need to understand that she has one, and
And
it's
you
not
know
personal.
that's an important distinction. You don't have to understand it. And a lot of times people, if they don't agree with what you're saying,
Mhm.
they will tell you that what you're saying isn't true or real.
Right.
That's not true at all.
That's right. And I really don't. I think in my book, oh, I can do that. Why can't she?
Exactly.
But that's not true. So, you just have to learn to deal with people where they are, because you'll never understand where their baseline is and what they can do. Don't invite me somewhere at night when I have to drive, you know, except I've been working now, and I've been working at night, and I hate it because it really, is challenging, you know?
And I want to get to you about the kind of work you're doing right now. But before that, so many times people think that if you've had something like a stroke, that means you can't do anything. And you've also talked about friends who, and I have to believe truly out of the kindness and the goodness of their spirits, what they would say to you is, if you pray, it'll be okay.
Oh, but yeah.
That didn't exactly work for you in the way that I imagine it was intended.
Well, it dismisses what's going on. It's not something that you can pray away. You have to find strategies to help yourself live this life. And I believe in God. I'm not a religious person, but I think that God puts things in your path, like the man on the boat who comes and says, "I'll save you," and you tell him, "I'm waiting for God." Well, I think that you have to take the help however it shows up. And,
Now that's an important life lesson. You let's say a little bit more about friends and family and how they can really be helpful. Because a lot of times, as you said, if you don't know, you don't know. And maybe listening is part of learning how to know.
you know, I was thinking about that we talked, when I read your memo. And the thing that people should do, first of all, they should understand that they don't understand, and they never will. And these problems, if they really want to understand, they should look it up. They should research and find out, what is this all about. When I first went to the doctor, the vestibular specialist, he told me, a great doctor, he said, he says, what's happening to you is caused by something called the eighth cranial nerve. When you get time, when you get the ability, you should look that up, and it'll explain what's happening to you. And so when I did, then I was a relief, because now you know what your enemy's name is. And so you can deal with something that you understand is real, instead of something, the floor would feel like marshmallows under my feet. And I didn't understand why I felt like I was sinking. Then you tell other people this, your friends and your family, I have to hold on to you, because in your head, you don't know what's happening. Because
Right.
the floor isn't sinking. You know this, but no one else knows it. You don't know it. And so it's these types of things that no one gets. If they really want to know, they should find out. They really love you. I say they'll find out what the real medical value of this all is.
Really doing research and understanding. Folks, I'm going to ask you, I know that by now you've heard some things that are really important for you to hear and perhaps things that are increasing your curiosity. I am going to ask you if you will like, subscribe, share this conversation with someone you care about. What M.E.S.H is all about is really speaking to you about things that impact your mental, emotional, and social health. And with that, I want to go back to our very important conversation with Joyce. Joyce, you talked about a book that you're working on right now that you are really gearing towards medical personnel. Say more about why that is so important to you.
Because it took me almost a year to figure out, to find out a doctor who understood my problems. When I was in the nursing home, I was with a physical therapist, and I told him I had to hold on to the wall, and everything looked crooked and tilted. I felt like I was in a picture frame against the wall that was crooked. He
Huh.
kept giving me strength exercises, and I said, "There's nothing wrong with my legs. It's something going on my head." And I didn't know anything about stroke and cognitive damage, but I knew it was up here. It
Yes.
wasn't in my legs. They even did the test where they kick you behind the knees and see if they buckle. I was strong. After he got through and he was tired of dealing with me, he sent me outside on my regular visits. He said it was every week. I stayed in the nursing home for like 10 days. And every day I had physical therapy. And every day he would tell me to go outside and take a walk by myself.
Wow.
And so I learned, well, when I went home from the nursing home, I had another physical therapist come in to test my strength and agility. And she did, but by now I was through with physical therapists. I said they don't know. So she said, is there any do you have any questions? And I started to say no. Then I say, no, you better ask anybody you can find. I say, well, I told her about the issues, can't, things tilted. When I read or turn my head, I felt like I was going to throw up.
Mm.
And she said, hold on a minute. And she sat down. She told me to stand in front of a chair. And she took a pencil and she went up and down and horizontally and diagonally. And she said, because she could see me, kind of panicking, and she said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "Hold on the chair so you won't fall." Now, no other physical therapist, I've seen like three before her, and told her the
Wow.
same thing. And she was the only one. She said, I said, "What's wrong with me? Why do I feel this way?" She said, "Well, your brain, it's the result of the stroke. Your brain has been like in a car accident. You're,
Mm.
it's like out of alignment, and you can't feel and see things the way you used to. You'll need a balance specialist." And then she said, "This is what you have to say. You have to use these words. You have to say vestibular specialist and a balance specialist. Those are the only words that they're going to get." Now,
Thank goodness
that's,
for her.
yeah, I've been looking for her to talk in the book, but she's gone. I don't know where she is, but it was incredible. It took all that to get to the right person who understood. And in the book, I have a chapter on discharge practices. In Maryland alone, there's a class action suit about against nursing homes about
Mm.
discharging people improperly and not having enough staff and all sorts of things. And so I'm using all these things I learned in the discharge chapter of this book. And you know, I'm trying to say to medical professionals, because I have had a lot of good ones, this is not an indictment of the medical system. It's something that help them do better, they'll do a better job,
Yeah.
because I'm just an example of one person who I believe this discharge system failed.
And that's an important piece of information. No one is perfect. Nobody knows everything about everything. And again, the book, that what little I have seen of what you are writing is just absolutely magnificent. We are gonna close out our conversation today, but I'm looking forward to hearing more about that book and having you back on when you are closer to or have finished that book, because we've got a lot more to talk about. But I
Oh,
do
thank you
thank
so much.
I thank you so much for joining us today on this edition of M.E.S.H. Thank you, Joyce.
Thank you.
And folks, as you know, I'm Pamela Brewer, and I'm going to ask you to be sure to like, subscribe, and share today's conversation with someone you care about. I'll be here next week, and I hope you are too. Take care.